My name is Quinn Delaney, and I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. The first time I realized something was terribly wrong with my husband, Jared, it came not from suspicion or a dramatic confrontation at home, but from a consultation request from the emergency department at my own hospital. It was just past 4 in the morning. I had just wrapped up 2 back-to-back surgeries for ectopic pregnancies. My scrubs were soaked with sweat, my arms heavy, and my head foggy from exhaustion. I was ready to collapse in the on-call room when my pager buzzed, emergency consult pregnant patient room 3, dragging my sore legs down the corridor. I made my way to the still thinking about how I could catch a couple hours of sleep afterward. But the moment I stepped into the emergency bay, I knew something was off. The sliding doors flew open just as I arrived, and the paramedics rushed in, wheeling 2 people in on stretchers, a man and a woman. The woman was visibly pregnant. Her face pale, hair matted to her forehead with sweat. The man, in nothing but a damp white bathrobe, clutched his swollen knee, groaning in pain. Couple, the paramedic briefed quickly. The man slipped in the shower and hit his knee hard, possibly a dislocation or fracture. The woman fainted from emotional distress. She's pregnant and panicked. We've stabilized her for now, and she's regained consciousness as if on cue. The woman lifted her head, her voice trembling but clear. Honey, are you okay? Don't scare me. Doctors, please take care of my husband first. I'm fine. Her husband. Before I could process her words, she was wheeled away into the neighboring resuscitation room. I stood frozen for a second, still wondering whether she was the one needing my consult. Then I turned toward the man on the stretcher, and my heart stopped. That face, that voice. Jared, my Jared, who was supposedly away on a business trip in another city. What the hell was going on? I stepped forward instinctively, my breath catching in my throat. I reached for the privacy curtain and pulled it aside, locking eyes with him. He was curled on the bed, clutching his left knee, wincing with pain. The moment he saw me, his expression twisted into a mix of shock and horror, blinked rapidly, as if hoping I was a hallucination. His mouth opened slightly wide enough to fit a boiled egg, if we're being honest, and for a split second he forgot all about the pain. I felt my stomach twist. I'd seen many cases of infidelity in my line of work, pregnancies that didn't add up, women in tears, men begging behind closed doors. But when the betrayal hit you personally, it was a different kind of devastation, a different kind of rage. Just the night before, he had videoed me saying he missed me, he'd looked me in the eyes and told me he loved me, and now here he was lying in with another woman, calling him husband when I asked, stepping up to the bed. Voice cold as steel. Did you become someone else's husband, and how come I didn't get the memo? He flinched like I'd slapped him, the color drained from his face. Quinn, it's not what you think. His voice cracked. He looked around desperately, but the curtain was fully drawn. We were alone, no one to save him. This isn't what it looks like. Please let me explain. He reached out, but I took a step back. Explain, I scoffed, teeth clenched. You want to explain how you went from Face's theme in your wife to playing house with a pregnant woman in a hotel bathroom. The air was thick with antiseptic and tension. He stammered, panic written all over his face. I swear this is the first time. Just give me a chance. Please don't do this here. Give me some face. First time. That was the worst lie he could have told. Cheating isn't a single event, a mindset, a crack in the foundation. Once you break trust, it's never whole again. I looked at his face, one I once thought I'd grow old with, and all I felt was revulsion. No amount of begging could erase the image of that woman calling him husband. No apology could undo the way my heart was splintering in my chest. I could have screamed, could have slapped him, could have made a scene right there in the but I didn't. I inhaled deeply, forcing the rage to cool beneath the surface like lava under ice, because tearing him apart now might feel good for a minute. But it wouldn't fix anything. Getting a divorce would mean splitting everything we built. He'd walk away with half of what I earned, and then what? Use my money to live happily ever after with her? No, that wasn't justice, and I wouldn't let this hospital become a stage for my humiliation. Not when my colleagues were watching, not when word could spread that I, of all people, got played. So I stood tall, my voice calm but cutting. You have no shame, but I do. And I won't let your mess become my joke. I stepped back, my pulse still hammering in my ears. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. If I wanted to win, I needed to be smart. I needed time to gather facts, to figure out how deep this betrayal went. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with, him and her. Only by knowing my enemy could I make sure they paid for every ounce of pain they caused me. Dr. Delaney, a nurse, called softly from the hallway. You are needed in resuscitation room 2. The pregnant patient is stable and requesting consultation. I turned slowly, gave Jared one last icy glance, and adjusted my coat game on a young female emergency doctor jogged over to me, her expression tight with urgency. She spoke quickly, trying to explain the situation as clearly as possible. Though her words tumbled over one another in haste, I barely had time to process what she was saying when I saw the orthopedic doctor arrive. His white coat flapping behind him like a cape, he gave a brief nod of acknowledgement and cut straight to the point. Let's do an MRI first. We'll need a resonance scan to take a closer look. As soon as he finished speaking, several nurses stepped forward, their movements practiced and efficient, and began to push the rescue bed toward the examination room. I instinctively moved to help, placing my hands gently on the edge of the bed, not really out of care, but more out of habit. I made sure my face stayed neutral, giving nothing away as I silently helped guide the bed down the corridor. Once we reached the entrance of the operating area, I stepped back, slipping my phone into the pocket of my surgical gown. I watched as the rescue cart rolled farther and farther away, the wheels humming against the linoleum floor until it disappeared around the corner, and just like that, I exhaled. A strange sense of relief washed over me. Thank God I was still in training when I got married, and I never invited anyone from the hospital to the wedding. Otherwise the mess unfolding today would have spread like wildfire. It would have left a permanent stain on my career, a scandalous joke whispered in every corner of the department. I could already imagine the smirks, the side glances, the fake concern laced with Schadenfreude. I shook the thoughts from my head and turned away from the empty corridor, walking straight toward the emergency room, the one where she was just like that. After all the searching, all the mental rehearsals of what I'd say or do if I ever faced her again, there she was. No effort, no warning, and she's pregnant. That fact hit me like a punch to the gut. How is that even possible? I don't know how I should feel. My mind was racing, churning with disbelief, confusion, and most of all, rage. It boiled in me like a storm. I wanted to seize this moment to direct all my hatred into a single blow right there aimed at her swollen belly, hoping to end everything in one cruel twist of fate, in betrayal. There are no innocent parties. A man who cheats his filth, but a woman who welcomes it is no better. If the egg wasn't cracked, how could the fly land? When I saw her, really saw her, I felt that belief solidify in my bones. She was curled up on the hospital bed like a delicate flower caught in a thunderstorm. Her pretty face, stained with tears and smudged makeup, made her look like one of those pitiful heroines from a melodrama, the kind of girl that makes men want to play the savior. No wonder Jared was taken in with her soft features, trembling lips, and those watery eyes. She looked like a wounded fawn, but I wasn't buying it. The eyeliner trailing down her cheeks like spider legs and the pale foundation melting under hospital lights only made her performance more obvious. She was trying too hard. She turned her head as I entered, the fake sobs cutting off like a faucet, her eyes red but wide with a practiced innocence, locked onto mine. "Doctor," she whimpered, reaching out with a shaking hand. "Is something wrong with my husband?" She tried to grab my arm and I recoiled instinctively, turning my body just enough for her hand to miss. The gesture was automatic, like brushing off a spider. The thought of her touching me sent a wave of nausea through my stomach. Looking at her pathetic act only made me colder. Jared wasn't here, so who was she performing for, fainting from worry? Please, did she really come to the hospital hoping I'd show up just to create some kind of dramatic confrontation? But something felt off the way she looked at me, the way she spoke. There was no recognition in her eyes, none of the flustered guilt or fear I'd expected. Her voice, her expression, everything was calm, too calm. Could it be she didn't recognize me? Then again, I had just come out of surgery. I was still wrapped from head to toe in sterling gear, surgical gown, cap, mask. Only my eyes were visible. Of course she didn't know who I was, so I decided to test her. With a deliberate slowness, I removed my mask, then my cap, letting her get a full view of my face. I met her gaze, head on, no longer hiding, and asked in the most indifferent tone I could muster, "Where exactly are you feeling discomfort? My lower abdomen feels a little uncomfortable." She replied softly, "I'm pregnant, doctor." There wasn't a flicker of emotion in her eyes, no anger, no curiosity, no shock, not even the barest hint of recognition. Her voice was steady, her demeanor calm, as if she was speaking to a complete stranger. And in that moment I knew she genuinely didn't know who I was. Why, she wasn't dumb. If she was involved in an affair, wouldn't she have at least done her homework? Wouldn't she want to know about the wife? Unless she had no intention of replacing me, then what was she after? Jared isn't wealthy. Not in the way that would attract a typical gold digger if she were looking for money. She had enough charm to easily find herself a rich second-generation heir. So was it love? That idea was laughable. This whole situation made less and less sense the longer I stood there watching her lie on that bed with her tear-streaked face and carefully calculated innocence. And yet, beneath all that confusion, the fury still burned, quiet, sharp, and all-consuming. I clenched my fists behind the folds of my gown. Whatever game she was playing, I wasn't going to be a pawn, not this time. I pulled my mask back on, feeling the familiar elastic snap behind my ears. My mind was already racing, thoughts spinning rapidly as my hands moved on autopilot. I reached for a pair of sterling gloves, snapping them on with practiced ease. My voice was calm but firm as I instructed her to lie down. "Let's get you examined first." "How long have you been pregnant?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. 50 days. She replied without hesitation. Something about the way she answered made me pause for a second. It was too quick, too smooth, like she'd rehearsed it. There was no flicker of doubt. No glance upward in thought, just a flat, prepared response. It struck me as odd. She didn't know me, had never met me before, and yet she answered with such certainty. Still, I kept my expression unreadable. There was no point confronting her now. It would only put her on alert. If I pushed too hard, she'd get defensive, maybe even make a scene. And if things escalated into a medical dispute, it wouldn't be worth it, not for a fleeting moment of personal satisfaction. No. I needed to be patient, strategic. "I'll arrange an ultrasound for you," I said, removing my gloves and tossing them straight into the medical waste bin. The sound of them hitting the plastic liner felt final. She suddenly sat up, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes with a trembling hand. Her movements, her quick, almost panicked as she tugged at her clothes, trying to smooth the wrinkles away. "Doctor, is there something wrong? Do I need to be hospitalized?" Her voice was fragile, a tremor underneath that betrayed her anxiety. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence linger for a beat, letting it weigh on her. "Let's wait for the results before we discuss that," I said evenly, "but based on your current condition, hospitalization may be necessary." But she started clearly rattled. "Don't rush to conclusions," I interrupted, my voice, soft but serious. "We'll wait for the ultrasound, then we'll know more." Outwardly, I remained calm, even professional. Inwardly, I was watching her like at every twitch of her mouth, the way her eyes darted between mine, the tightening of her jaw. I absorbed it all. She was worried, and that was exactly what I needed. I've dealt with enough patients to know the more you insist they need care, the more they resist. They start to believe you're trying to squeeze something out of them. But if you plant the idea, subtly, suggest it's their choice, they're far more cooperative, especially someone like her. So careful, so guarded. The longer she stayed under observation, the better chance I had of getting close, of figuring things out, of being in control. And just as I anticipated, after a few moments of hesitation, she took a deep breath and said, "Doctor, no matter what the results say, I want to stay. I need to make sure the baby is okay. This baby, it means everything to me." There it was, a small flicker of triumph flashed through me, but I kept my face neutral, simply nodding. "All right," I said, scribbling a note in her chart. "Will admit you for observation once the ultrasound results came back." I barely glanced at them. I didn't need to see more. I moved quickly, Making arrangements for her admission, I gave the nurse specific instructions to place her in a private room, somewhere quiet, where I could visit without raising suspicion. As I handed over her ID for the paperwork, I finally saw her full name page: 25 years old, 10 years younger than me, 25, the prime of youth, and yet here she was, already tangled in something so sordid, carrying a child that wasn't even her husband's. A child that my husband's. I was 35, Jared, and I had been married for 8 years. For the first 5, he insisted we take our time, enjoy life, not rush into parenthood. We used every form of contraception religiously, and when we finally started trying nothing month after month, year after year, still my belly remained stubbornly flat. Why, how did she manage to get pregnant so easily, so quickly? That question had haunted me for weeks. Until the day I picked up Jared's phone. He had changed his passcode to a 6-digit number. I tried everything: my birthday, his birthday, our wedding anniversary, even his mother's birthday. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when one final thought hit me. Paige's birthday IK in 96101 unlocked. My chest tightened, but in a strange way I also felt a sick kind of relief. Jared was always careless with these things. A typical straight man who never thought I'd guess something so obvious. The moment the phone opened, a strange clarity washed over me. My fingers moved fast, swiping through conversations, pictures, call logs. My heart was pounding, but my mind was razor sharp, detached even. And there it was, message after message: "Baby, I love you XO." I didn't even need to read further. I knew everything I needed to know. They weren't just having an affair, they were building a life, and now she was carrying his child. From the chat history I to extract 4 crucial pieces of information. The first one hit me like a punch to the gut. It turns out their colleagues in the power system is her superior and she's the subordinate. A classic setup, isn't it? The kind of daily interaction that naturally brews something more behind closed office doors and casual glances over conference tables. I'm usually the type who's too buried in surgeries and patient charts to notice the subtle exchanges of eye contact or lingering smiles. But even I couldn't stay oblivious forever. Second, let's call her the lover. She graduated just 3 years ago and working in this unit soon after. According to the messages, they officially got together 3 months ago. And now just recently, she discovered she's about 50 days pregnant. But here's where things get murky. I found a divorce certificate tucked away in Jared's drawer, dated exactly 3 months ago. That explains everything. It's no wonder Paige, the sole Coral lover, suddenly began treating me like a ghost, ignoring my existence as if I had vanished into thin air. In her eyes, I was already the exclus who would bother to care about someone they see as irrelevant. That's why they've grown so brazen, so public, acting like a picture-perfect couple in front of everyone, calling each other pet names in the hallways. Technology is advanced these days. Faking a divorce certificate would only take minutes, but even so, Jared's effort in manufacturing this illusion caught me off guard. It wasn't just a lie, it was meticulous enough to make me break out in a cold sweat. He really went that far. The third thing I noticed was the constant stream of red envelopes, not just for birthdays. No, that would be too ordinary. There were celebratory cash gifts for every little milestone. The first week after making their relationship official, the 2-week mark, 1 month, and now the big one, the pregnancy. It was all too frequent, too calculated. Paige seemed to be angling for money at every possible turn, and Jared, like an obedient fool, kept transferring funds without question. In just 3 months, over 100,000 yuan had flowed from his WeChat to hers. What made my blood boil wasn't just the money, it was the fact that half of that money came from me, from the house I helped pay for, from the salary I earned standing for hours in the operating room until my legs went in, my back screamed in pain, and I nearly passed out from exhaustion just picturing all that hard-earned money being funneled into Paige's bank account, into her handbags, makeup, and who knows what else. Made rage surge up from my chest, hot and controlled. I clenched my fists. I will get that money back with interest. But even through the fury, a sense of confusion gnawed at me. Jared, for all his generosity, isn't exactly rolling in wealth. Sure, he's from a family with some land compensation, But apart from being a Seoul Corel second-generation demolisher, he can't even be classified as comfortably middle class. So why is Paige so obsessed with him? What does she see in him? Is Jared just one of many stepping stones she's using, or perhaps just the latest paw wall in her carefully planned game? I glanced up at the clock on the wall of the medical office. Jared's MRI for his knee should be done by now. I snapped out of my thoughts quickly, closed the chat logs on his phone, and erased all browsing traces. My heart was pounding as I hurried into the hallway, down the elevator, and back into the emergency department. With trembling hands, I placed his phone back on the cabinet beside the emergency bed, just as I'd found it. As I turned to leave, the young female doctor from earlier reappeared, pretending to search for something. "Have you seen my stethoscope?" she asked casually. "No," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "I'll look again. Maybe I left it somewhere," she said, scanning the room without really looking. I could tell she was suspicious before I left. I added nonchalantly, "Oh, by the way, there's a phone in the rescue room. I'm not sure whose it is." She paused, then said thoughtfully, "Could be the guy who hurt his knee earlier, Director Delaney. You should go back to your rounds. I'll call orthopedic in a bit and check. If I find the stethoscope, I'll send it to you using the transfer bucket. Director Delaney," she added with a forced smile. Back in the medical office, I took a deep breath and began flipping through PA's medical records. Her bold claim kept echoing in my mind. I'm 50 days pregnant. The more I thought about it, the more something felt off, like there was a deeper intention behind her insistence. Then I saw it, the pregnancy ultrasound report, and suddenly I smiled. All the suspicions that had haunted me, that had kept me awake at night, finally made sense. The report clearly stated the fetal image with distinguishable head, buttocks, and limbs, that level of development at least 3 months along. No question from a medical perspective, a pregnancy at just 50 days would at most show a tiny gestational sac, maybe a fetal pole if you're lucky, but a fully formed silhouette that's impossible at 50 days, which brought me back to her messages with Jared. She kept emphasizing that she was only about 50 days pregnant over and over. Like she was trying to convince him, not just herself. It wasn't just a lie, it was a calculated move, a strategy. She wanted to hide the truth about the baby's conception date. But why was she afraid? Jared would do the math and realize the baby might not be his. Whatever her reason, her web of lies was starting to unravel, and I was no longer the clueless except wiring in the shadows. Knowing the actual month of her pregnancy changed everything. That one detail alone cracked open the truth I had been trying not to see. So what exactly is she trying to hide? Whose child is this? And most importantly, why go through all this effort to keep it under wraps? But no matter who the real father is, I know with absolute certainty that this child cannot be Jared's. That woman is already a few months along, and Jared was still very much tangled in our bed during that time. And yet Jared is still basking in the glow of being a new father. He's practically floating. I can see it in his eyes, the pride, the excitement, the anticipation of holding his baby. How would he react if he found out the truth, if he realized the child has been doting over the one he was ready to claim wasn't even his? The thought of his delusion made my stomach twist with a bitter mix of anger and disbelief. Know your enemy, know yourself, and you need not fear 100 battles. That old saying echoed in my mind. I was grateful. Grateful that I had held myself back 3 hours ago, didn't explode, didn't throw away my dignity in a fit of rage. That decision brought me space, space to breathe, to think, to plan, and now my mind was clear, crystal clear. It was 3 a.m. outside, the world was dark and quiet. The hospital corridors dim and echoing only with the distant beeping of monitors, but inside my mind a storm was brewing. A plan was slowly taking shape, a plan for revenge so precise it made my pulse quicken. You want to break my world with lies, then I'll use your lies to destroy yours. I finished typing up the medical records with mechanical focus after sign. I turned to the nurse and said calmly, "Call me on my cell if anything comes up." Then I headed back to the break room, my sanctuary, for the moment. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were Lang Lien, skin pale from exhaustion, and there was a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. Still not enough, I opened the drawer, pulled out a small bottle of eye drops, and tilted my head back, a few drops in each eye, then I rubbed them hard enough to redden the rims. I needed the right look, pained, vulnerable, like a woman trying to hold it together. Only then did I pick up my phone and call him Jared. I said into the receiver, my voice low but steady, "We need to talk." 15 minutes later he wheeled himself into my break room. One hand was gripping the pain pump, the other pushing the wheelchair slowly across the floor. His knee was still swollen, but his expression had changed. Gone was the panic I had seen earlier in the now with no audience. He carried himself with that all too familiar arrogance. He stopped a few feet in front of me, tilted his head down slightly as if to appear contrite, and sighed. "I'm sorry, Quinn," he began, voice calm, rehearsed. "I was wrong, but honestly, society is wrong too, girls these days. You can't imagine how aggressive they are." His tone was almost casual, like he was recounting a minor workplace annoyance. He shrugged slightly, as if to say, "What could I do?" And anyway, he continued, "I'm still a man. You know how these things are in this situation. It's not like I was the only one gaining something." My heart clenched, but I forced myself to stay quiet. "Besides," he added, "you're not completely blameless either." He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "All these years, sure. You've earned quite a lot, and I appreciate that, but you haven't given me a son." I slowly lifted my head, letting my eyes widen with feigned shock. The tears I had summoned earlier were now clinging to my lashes. To complete the act, I dug my nails into my palm just enough to bring a sting that would push a few tears out. "So," he said, looking almost righteous now, "I just wanted a child. Is that so wrong?" That was the moment I realized Jared wasn't just unfaithful, he was shameless. His logic shattered every belief I had about marriage, about partnership, about love. He wasn't even trying to deny what he did. Instead he twisted everything around, painted himself as the victim in some ridiculous morality play. According to him, his betrayal wasn't his fault. It was society's fault. It was my fault. I was the fault. Career-obsessed wife who failed to give him what he deserved. The way he spoke. It was as if I'd backed him into a corner and forced him to cheat. Even the chat logs between him and that woman Paige painted me as the villain, the overbearing wife, the one who suffocated him, who never made him feel alive. He wrote as if he were a bird trapped in a cage, fluttering helplessly, desperate to be free, an innocent man with no choice. I stared at him, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "So you just let another woman have your child?" I asked, eyes wet, lips trembling. "That's how you solved the problem?" Jared saw my vulnerability and immediately sprang into action. He stood up from the wheelchair, limped toward me, and sat down next to me on the edge of the bed. Then he reached out and wrapped his arms around me. I held still, the nausea climbed my throat. But I didn't push him away. "Not yet. You already know everything, don't you?" he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "She's been admitted here under your care, hasn't she? So of course there's no hiding it from you anymore." He sighed, as if confessing a white lie. "The truth always comes out in the end." Yes, it does, but what he didn't know, what he could never suspect, was that I would be the one to decide how and when the truth finally explodes around him. I'll be standing at a safe distance, watching him burn. But maybe this is for the best. Quinn's voice was soft, like he was trying to cushion a blow he had already delivered. He reached out as if to comfort me, but I instinctively took a half step back. "I always thought we'd grow old together," he continued, his tone filled with forced sincerity. "But I also wanted a child. I've always wanted one." Then came Paige's name, like poison in my ear. "She's simple, cute, still in college. At least if she gives birth, the child will share my blood. Isn't that better than adopting a stranger's baby with no ties to us at all?" My breath caught in my throat. I had to remind myself to keep my expression in check, to hold back the storm boiling inside me. Yes, I admit it, the tears, the wounded look, the frail posture I put on earlier. None of it was real. It was calculated, a show, a strategy. But when I heard that his justification, his twisted reasoning, his calm betrayal, my shock was no longer an act. It was raw, it was real. Cheating is cruel, Yes, but being forced to stay in the same room, in the same life with the woman who ruined your marriage, that's something else entirely. That's torment, and the audacity of him wanting me to smile through it all. To help him raise their child and play pretend as a happy mom while he lives out his fantasy of being a doting father. I clenched my jaw, my stomach turning with rage. It took everything in me to swallow my fury, to lower my gaze and force out 5 trembling words. I need some time. My voice was thin, but my tone carried a weight I hoped he would misinterpret as in a struggle. My face twisted into a mix of pain, hesitation, and reluctant understanding. I wanted him to think I was still holding on, still processing, still considering that way. When I do strike back, it'll cut deeper. Quinn gave a slow nod, placing his hand gently on my back. The gesture falsely tender. Just think about it, okay, he said. This is about our future, a bright one. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to get some rest, he added softly, then let go of me and pushed himself up from the sofa. As he turned toward the door, I caught it, a tiny, smug grin flickering across his face like a glitch in a mask. He sat back in the wheelchair, awkwardly adjusting his balance, then paused at the door. His eyes met mine for a brief second. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, and then he was gone. I stood frozen until the software of the wheelchair faded completely down the hallway. Then, finally, I let the bitter laugh escape my lips. Hard for me, that woman is pregnant, and I should be the one struggling. No, I'm not sad. I'm ecstatic because the larger that child grows in her belly, the closer I am to watching their perfect little fantasy come crashing down. My revenge is coming, and it will be thorough. It will be slow, and it will be unforgettable. I barely slept that night after dragging my exhausted body through the rest of my shift. I finally made it home, hoping to get a few hours of peace, but as soon as I reached the entrance, I saw a girl standing at my door. A patient who had previously scheduled an abortion. Her eyes were swollen, arms tightly wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her world together. We're all adults. We know what we're doing. And yet so many people keep making reckless decisions that leave chaos in their wake, disrupting everything around them, especially my plans. Come on. I unlocking the door and motioning for her to follow. We'll take care of it. I led her into the small operating room. A makeshift space that used to be connected to bed 53 next door. It had been hastily split into a separate room due to the surge in patients, and the wall dividing the 2 rooms was laughably thin. Just a single layer of flimsy flooring material. After the procedure, I peeled off my glove, ready to toss them into the yellow biohazard waste bag pressed against the far wall, and then I heard it, faint at first, like a radio playing in another room. But I knew that voice. I'd recognize it anywhere. "Baby, don't worry, I'll find a way to get the relocation compensation. I'm still working on improving life for you and our son." Then came hers, that sugar-sweet whimper that made my skin crawl. "Husband, I knew you loved me most. You won't let me or our son suffer, right?" The words sliced into me like knives, each syllable sharpened with betrayal. I slid down the wall slowly, my back pressed against the cold surface, knees drawn to my chest as if to protect what was left of me. My chest heaved and I felt the bitter truth crash over me like a wave. 4 or 5 hours ago he was holding me, whispering promises, painting pictures of a life we'd still share. And now he was already back at her side, making new promises, writing new lies. From the beginning, it was never about love, not with me, not with her, not with anyone. Jared only ever loved himself and PA, manipulative little parasite. After everything I spent on her, every meal, every favor, every compromise, she still wasn't satisfied. Now she was using the child growing inside her as leverage, twisting Jared's arm for more. The rage in me had no place to go, it pulsed beneath my skin. Clawed at my insides, I gritted my teeth, pressed my forehead to the wall, and dug my nails into it so hard I thought they might break. "I'll make you both regret everything. You want to destroy my life, then I'll burn yours to the ground, brick by brick, lie by lie. Let's see who survives the wreckage." The family's old bungalow had long been torn down, replaced by 3 neatly arranged apartment units, one for my in-laws, one for Jared and me. and a third unit that was sold off to offset the construction costs. Jared and I chipped in extra money to buy a place in a reputable school district. Thinking ahead to the day would finally have a child, it would make schooling easier, more convenient. Back then, I was full of hope, picturing a future filled with morning drop-offs, PTA meetings, and little backpacks lined up by the door. But lately, something had been nagging at me. I'd never heard a word about any demolition compensation. Not a cent. It felt suspicious. If compensation had been issued, where did it go? It seemed I had no choice but to make a trip to my mother-in-law's place and ask directly. Coincidentally, her birthday was just 3 days away, a perfect excuse to drop by without raising any suspicion. Jared, despite everything, remained the textbook definition of filial, even now, freshly discharged from the hospital and barely recovered. He wouldn't miss celebrating his mother's birthday as we stood downstairs in front of her building. He adjusted his posture, trying to walk normally as if nothing had happened. He leaned slightly toward me and lowered his voice. "Don't tell Mom I was in the hospital," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "No need to make her worry." I held back a scoff. What he really meant was don't tell her the truth or she might slap you across the face. I glanced sideways at him. Catching the flicker of guilt that crossed his face before he quickly looked away, I kept my face blank and nodded violently. To be fair, my mother-in-law had always treated me well. Jared was her only child, and she welcomed me into the family like a daughter of her own, and despite everything she didn't know, I didn't want to be the one to break her heart. At least not yet. Timing wasn't right, not until I had all the answers. As soon as we stepped through the door, I put on my warmest smile and took out the small gift box. I'd carefully prepared. "Mom, take a look, do you like it?" I said, opening the box to reveal a heavy gold bracelet nestled inside. Her eyes immediately lit up. She had always had a soft spot for gold, and I knew exactly what would please her. She reached out to touch the bracelet. The gleam of the metal catching the light as it slid onto her wrist, her face lit up with joy, but she still tried to play it down. "Oh, isn't this too expensive?" she said, frowning slightly, even as her fingers lingered on the bracelet. "You two work so hard for your money, you shouldn't be spending this much. Just return it." "Really, Mom? This is your first birthday after retiring," I said quickly, gently pressing her hand to keep her from taking it off. "As long as you like it. That's all that matters." I wasn't pretending in that moment. I genuinely meant it. Jared reached over and pulled the receipt out of the box. When he glanced at the number, his eyes widened in disbelief. 30,000, he muttered in US dollars. Then he looked at his mother with a forced smile. "Mom, look how much your daughter-in-law cares about you." But I caught it, the brief flash of displeasure in his eyes. He was clearly annoyed. I hadn't told him in advance about the price. Yes, Jared was filial, but only within a budget. His idea of being a good son stopped where the expenses crossed his internal psychological threshold. Of course, that budget didn't apply when it came to himself, and now clearly it didn't apply to her either. Paige, the woman carrying his child, I didn't acknowledge his look. Instead, I turned to my mother-in-law, eyes filled with what I hoped looked like sincere emotion. "Mom, if it weren't for you, where would I be today?" That wasn't an exaggeration, in a way. It was true. She had chosen me back when I was still a medical resident, rotating through internal medicine. I'd worked in the same department as her. She spotted me early on and took a liking to me. She used to joke that it was because I had clean polish, free nails, her kind of aesthetic. But I knew it was more than that. She admired my intelligence, my diligence, my calm and optimistic attitude. Though I came from a rural town, I had clawed my way into a prestigious clinical medicine program, one that combined both bachelor's and master's degrees. Academically, I was more than a match for her son. In her own words, I could fill in for the parts her son lacked and, more importantly, raise the next generation properly. Back then, I believed her. I believed in all of it, the approval, the future, the promise of a family would build together. And now I stood there, watching the bracelet gleam on her wrist and wondered what she would say if she knew. If she knew that the daughter-in-law she once praised had been betrayed, that the son she adored had handed the future to someone else. But for now, I smiled because it wasn't time yet. Her son, ever the obedient one, always holds his mother's opinion in high regard. Even if he's a bit old and fashionably and patriarchal in his thinking. Because of that, Jared has always treated me well on the surface. In his eyes, I was the perfect daughter-in-law, gentle, considerate, never confrontational. The kind of woman who knew her place and didn't stir up trouble. But now I finally understand the truth. My gentleness, my patience, my tendency to put others first, none of it was ever truly appreciated in Jared's eyes. Those qualities didn't make me valuable, they made me useful, easy to manage, easy to fool. He thought I was the type who would bend over backwards, to cater to his fragile masculinity, even to the point of raising his and her child like some selfless saint. So be it. If that's the role he's cast me in, then I'll play it flawlessly. At this moment, I am the very picture of warmth and understanding, but later I will be the storm that tears everything apart when it comes to dealing with shameless men like him. I don't believe in holding back. Mom, come in for a moment. I've got something to talk to you about, Jared said, gently guiding his mother into the bedroom. His voice was low but urgent, mysterious even. What's going on? Why so secretive? My mother-in-law seemed amused, clearly in a great mood today. She glanced toward the kitchen, where I was busy preparing lunch, and seemed a little embarrassed. Let's talk later. I should go help Quinn with the cooking. It's fine, Mom, I interrupted with a cheerful smile. You two go ahead and talk, I've got it under control. You know how much I love cooking. Just don't take too long, she replied with a chuckle, or Dong-si will start fussing. I gave her a gentle push toward the bedroom. Watched them disappear behind the door, and then turned back to the kitchen. My smile faded immediately. I reached up and pinched my cheeks to relax the stiffness in them, then turned on the exhaust fan at full speed to muffle any sounds from the bedroom. I washed a few fresh strawberries, her favorite, arranged them neatly on a small white plate, and then, barefoot and silent, crept toward the bedroom door. It wasn't completely shut. Inside, their voices floated out in muffled fragments. Mom, when are you planning to give me that demolition compensation? Jared asked in a lowered, coaxing tone. That money is meant for my grandson, she replied firmly, but it's not even $500,000. Just give me $200,000 for now. I'm in a tight spot. No. Absolutely not. Mom, you promised me, you said, as long as I married Quinn that money would be mine. I didn't want to hear any. My hand tightened around the plate, but I didn't make a sound. I had always thought Jared's greatest flaws were his infidelity, his casual betrayals, and his selfishness. But I was wrong. Even the foundation of our marriage, what I once believed to be love, was nothing more than part of his calculated plan to cash in on his mother's promise. No wonder he had been in such a rush back then to get the marriage certificate. It had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with money. I used to think my in-laws were kind-hearted people. I had no desire to hurt them, but now I realized the only way Jared would ever truly feel the sting of betrayal and scheming was to experience it from those closest to him. He needed to lose everything, not just me. By noon, my father-in-law came home from work. The table was set, the food ready. My mother-in-law was beaming, clearly enjoying her birthday, especially after receiving the gifts we had prepared. Jared, on the other hand, sat at the table, sulking, his face tight with frustration. He must not have gotten the money he asked for. During the meal, my mother-in-law turned to me with a bright smile. Quinn, you're now an associate chief physician. Your career is really taking off. But, well, isn't it time to start thinking about having a baby? Don't want to pressure you, but you're an obstetrician and gynecologist. You know better than anyone that advanced maternal age isn't good for you or the child. I kept my head down, pretending to focus on the grains of rice in my bowl. I poked at them with my chopsticks. Quiet, thoughtful. Mom's talking to you, Jared said, jabbing me with his elbow, his voice tinged with impatience. That was just like Jared. When he's upset he can snap at his own mother. But God forbid anyone else say a harsh word to her. He plays the loyal son, the perfect protector, all while rotting from the inside. His sudden, harsh tone brought back every disgusting thing he'd done in recent months, every lie, every betrayal. My stomach turned under the table. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms I could feel the tears beginning to form, welling up from a place of deep exhaustion, rage, and grief. I couldn't hold them back any longer. When I finally looked up, just at the right moment, tears began to fall, one drop after another, landing silently in my bowl. "What's wrong, dear? What happened?" My mother-in-law's gentle concern was the final straw that broke me. All my carefully maintained calm shattered everything I had buried. My heartbreak, my betrayal, my frustration, my fury rose to the surface, and for the first time, I didn't hide it. I finally couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears. My shoulders trembled uncontrollably as I sobbed, my breath catching with each heave of emotion. With shaking hands, I reached into the pocket of my coat and took out the men I had carefully prepared in advance. The paper was slightly crumpled from being held too tightly, and I gently placed it on the table in front of Jared, who was seated beside me. He picked it up, his brows furrowing as he scanned the document. After a few moments of confusion, he blinked and turned to his mother. "Mom, can you take a look at this?" he asked, passing her the report. "The prolactin level is high." "What does that mean?" My mother-in-law, a retired nurse who still kept up with medical news, took the paper with steady hands. Her expression was calm, maybe even a little amused. As if this were just some minor issue I was overreacting to, she glanced at the numbers, nodded, and then looked at me reassuringly. "I thought it was something serious," she said in a light tone. "It's just hyperprolactinemia." "Did they check the pituitary with an MRI?" "Yes," I sniffled, brushing away the tears clinging to the corners of my eyes. Aunt Ping at the MRI room said the scan looked normal then. "That's good," she said, warmly, patting my hand gently. "Nothing structural, that's a relief." Her voice was soothing, but her words felt clinical, detached, like someone comforting a neighbor rather than her own daughter-in-law. She continued, "Have you been taking bromocriptine?" "I have," I replied, my voice hoarse from. "But the results aren't great so far." I choked out another sob for effect, and I could sense Jared growing increasingly uncomfortable beside me. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. He hadn't offered a single word of comfort, not even a glance of empathy, but I could hear the long, heavy sigh he let out when my mother-in-law mentioned infertility. That sigh said everything. He believed the child growing in Paige's belly was his. And now this lab result confirmed what he needed to know. He wasn't the problem, I was. My mother-in-law, sensing the tension but trying her best to remain neutral, softened her voice. "Elevated prolactin can cause infertility, but it's not untreatable. Once the levels are managed, you should be able to conceive. It's just a matter of time." She meant well, but her words stabbed at my pride like needles. I caught a glimpse of Jared from the corner of my eye. He still hadn't spoken to me directly. But eventually he made a performative gesture. He reached out and gave my hand light, mechanical pat. "It's fine," he said, as if speaking to a stranger with the flu. "If you're sick, then treat it. That's it." That's all he had to say, and yet deep inside I was smiling because this was exactly what I needed. This whole performance, my tears, the report, the carefully crafted medical narrative, it served a dual purpose. First, it gave Jared the illusion of certainty. He no longer had any lingering doubts about his own fertility. Second, it subtly conveyed my supposed acceptance that I was beginning to come to terms with the idea of raising his and Paige's child, two birds with one stone. I watched as a flicker of relief and even pride passed across his face, and the corners of my mouth twitched ever so slightly in secret satisfaction. The trap was set. After leaving my mother-in-law's house, Jared and I went our separate ways. He headed back to the hospital to check on Paige while I returned home. The moment I stepped through the door, my phone buzzed with a new WeChat message. It was a photo from a college friend back in university. I had always kept a low profile. I wasn't flashy, but I was reliable. I helped people, shared my notes, and showed up when others needed support. Because of that, I built a strong network of true friends over the years, which scattered across the country. Some pursued their medical careers, others changed paths entirely, a few even stepped into the family business and now had access to all kinds of social resources, like the one who had just sent me this photo, a snapshot of a divorce decree. It was all about Paige. Intrigued, I opened my laptop and logged into WeChat. I downloaded the photo, then enlarged it on the screen, reading every line with care. It was all there, black and white, stamped and signed, legal undeniable page. Renna divorced from Victor Langley due to irreconcilable differences after marriage as compensation for the emotional damage and lost youth. Victor Langley was ordered to pay Paige $200,000. I stared at the document in disbelief, my fingers tightened around the edge of the keyboard. So Paige wasn't just a mistress, she was a professional, a serial heartbreaker, a gold digger. A chill ran down my spine and a cold sweat broke out on my back. My instincts had been right all along. Without wasting a second, I uploaded the photo from my computer to my email for safekeep, then wiped all traces of the file. I couldn't afford to leave any evidence behind, not yet. Next, I grabbed my ID and property certificate and rushed to the real estate bureau. I needed to check the house title to be sure. My heart pounded the entire way. What if he had secretly moved assets? What if I had been too late? But to my relief, the documents were unchanged. The property was still under my name and Jared's. He hadn't done anything behind my back. Not yet. A heavy weight lifted from my chest. Good, I thought, so your brain isn't completely gone yet, but just wait until the truth about Paige drops like a bomb. He thought, she was sweet, gentle, pure. In reality, she was a seasoned manipulator. And I couldn't wait for that moment, for his perfect fantasy to shatter. The day Paige was discharged, I took the day off from work. I wasn't needed in the hospital anyway, and there was something I needed to see with my own eyes. I booked a taxi and arrived early. Parking across the street from the hospital entrance, I lowered the window just enough to let in air, pulled my coat tighter around me, and waited. The trap had been baited. Now I was going to watch them walk right into it. Soon I spotted a familiar car in the distance. I quickly raised my binoculars, the metal I see against my gloves, and focused in on the license plate. It was the one I was waiting for. I leaned slightly forward and whispered to the driver master, "Follow that car across the street." It was a bitterly cold winter afternoon. I had dressed carefully for the occasion. An all WBL1 outfit to blend into the shadows paired with a deep black cap pulled low over my face. I didn't want to be recognized. I didn't want anything to go wrong. The taxi driver glanced at me through the rear view mirror, raising an eyebrow. "Are you catching someone cheating?" He had been waiting since earlier that day. I'd booked him well in advance. I didn't answer his question. I simply gave him a bitter smile, one that needed no explanation. "Don't worry," he said quickly. Reading between the lines, "I'll make sure they don't spot us. Nothing in this world disgusts me more than cheating men." He understood immediately. Without another word, he started the engine and carefully tailed the car ahead. We followed at a cautious distance as the car wound through city streets and eventually pulled into a residential complex. It circled around, weaving through narrow lanes between the buildings before finally stopping at a parking space near one of the entrances. As soon as they stepped out of the car, the two of them practically pounced on each other. They didn't even look around. Right there in the open, they kissed with the kind of desperation that made my stomach turn. It was a disgusting display, completely ignoring the possibility of being seen, of being caught. I didn't move a muscle until I saw them enter the building and disappear into the stairwell. "Girl, if you want to catch them in the act," the driver offered, turning slightly in his seat. "I can help you record a video, something useful, something the court will take seriously if you ever need it." He sounded sincere, even a little protective. I can't stand people who try to eat from one pot while still clinging to another bowl, he added, clearly upset on my behalf. I gave a soft nod. My expression calm. It wasn't about catching them Redshank anymore. Today wasn't about the drama. It was about something much simpler. Confirmation I needed to know where Paige lives. The address on her hospital admission form only listed a general area, no building number, no unit, no floor, but today I confirmed it with my own eyes. She's living in the school district apartment that we bought, the one I helped pay for. The one he claimed was just an investment property I thought back to 3 months ago. Jared had casually mentioned that the place was being rented out, even going as far as leaving 10,000 yuan in the drawer as rent. At the time, I almost laughed out loud. How ridiculous, how insulting. Go back, I told the driver, my voice steady. He hesitated. Miss, are you really just going to let them off like that? I looked at him and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Who said anything about letting them off? No, letting them go would be too easy. I want them to get comfortable. I want them to believe they've won. Because only then will it hurt more when I tear everything down. The more they want something, the more I want to ruin it in front of their eyes, slowly, piece by piece, until they're left with nothing. That evening, when Jared came home, he was uncharacteristically gentle. Perhaps it was guilt. Maybe he thought he owed me something for the double life he was leading. He kissed me, touched me like nothing had changed. I didn't stop him. I swallowed the nausea rising in my chest and let him do as he pleased in his shallow, macho mind. My lack of rejection must have felt like forgiveness. He thought I was being soft, that I had moved on, that I had accepted everything. But just when things were heating up, I quietly murmured my period, came to his movements, stopped, the mood instantly evaporated, and I smiled. There was no need to continue the performance. The goal had been achieved. There was no need to gamble my health just to preserve his illusion, even though both Paige and Jared had recently tested negative for syphilis and HIV. Who knows if they were still in the window? Period. I wasn't about to risk my life just because they couldn't keep their pants on from then on. No matter how late Jared came home, I stopped reacting. I didn't ask where he'd been, didn't argue, didn't scold. Sometimes I even pretended to be understanding, like the perfect, supportive wife. He spent more and more time with PA, taking care of her, doting on her, and the more effort he put into playing daddy, the more I smiled behind his back. At the beginning of her pregnancy, Paige had severe morning sickness. Jared didn't know what to do, so he actually came to me for advice. Imagine that I looked at him quietly, said nothing, and thought to myself, stop pretending, Paige, you're already past the first trimester. Sure enough, not long after her symptoms mysteriously disappeared, Jared's worried frown faded too. Paige's appetite returned with a vengeance. She started craving sour foods, constantly sending him out to satisfy by her latest whim. Whenever he spoke about it, Jared's eyes lit up with joy, pure, naive joy, like a boy waiting for Christmas. One evening, he came home bursting with excitement. He practically bounced into the apartment. It's a boy, he announced. We're having a son. Finally our family has an heir. I looked at his glowing face and smiled too. I was genuinely happy. Only my happiness came from a completely different place. He rambled on, but lately she's been craving spicy hot pot non-stop. Is that safe for the baby? Let her eat more vegetables in the hot pot, I said gently. That way the nutrition is more balanced. That was the only suggestion I gave during her entire pregnancy, the only one I intended to give. What Jared didn't know was that an old college classmate of mine had sent me a document, one that included a detailed record of Paige's diet, her allergies, her preferences. She adored hot pot, loved animal organs, was obsessed with foie gras, thought it made her feel rich. Refined. What she didn't know was that sometimes in certain kinds of hot pot broths, dangerous substances can build up, especially in low-quality restaurants or with reused oils, especially when you mix vegetables with animal byproducts. Sometimes letting people have what they want is the best way to ruin them. I watched quietly as they slowly walked into the trap. I was weaving, so carefully, so patiently with every meal, every kiss, every lie. They were wrapping the net tighter around themselves, and I knew the time to pull the net closed wasn't far off. About a month later, just as I was about to crawl into bed, I heard Jared's phone ring on the nightstand. It was late, past 11 p.m., and I was already half asleep, eyes heavy, the room dimly lit by the bedside lamp. His voice, though muffled at first, suddenly sharpened with urgency. What happened? He said sharply, sitting up in bed. Call 120 now, I'm heading to the hospital right away. He jumped up, pulling on clothes in a frenzy. The phone clutched tightly to his ear. Before I could say a word, I heard the front door slam shut with a loud bang. His hurried footsteps disappeared down the hallway. The silence that followed was deafening. The next morning the living room was dim with the pale grey light of dawn filtering through the curtains. As I stepped out in my slippers, still groggy from sleep, I saw Jared sitting on the couch. His face was unshaven, his beard scruffy, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His whole body radiated exhaustion, but also something more, something like fear. "She has a urethral stone," he muttered without even lifting his head. His voice was low, hoarse, like he'd been crying. "The doctor said it's 20 millimeters. Surgery is necessary, but there are risks. They might not be able to save the baby." That name Paige hung in the air like a sour taste I couldn't spit out. I walked over slowly and sat beside him. My hand moved almost instinctively, gently patting his back. I didn't speak, just let the science settle between us. It reminded me of that night. The night I first discovered his betrayal. I'd found him hiding in the lounge, avoiding me, ashamed. That night, he reached out to pat my back, too, he wanted to offer comfort, but also ease his own guilt. Now here I was, mirroring that same gesture. Back then I didn't say it out loud, but I knew we had already become enemies from the moment he chose another woman. He'd turned our marriage into a battlefield where reconciliation was no longer an option. Now, watching him, I saw something I'd never seen in all 8 years of our marriage. Not anger, not indifference, but vulnerability. Real helpless vulnerability. He looked broken, and I felt an unexpected sense of release, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. Later, when I logged into the hospital's testing system, I saw Paige's lab results: elevated uric acid levels. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a cold thought crept in. Justice may come late, but it never forgets. That woman who had destroyed my peace was finally facing a consequence she couldn't control. Still, I didn't say a word to Jared. I just stayed beside him, letting the silence speak for me. I knew my silence meant I was watching, I was remembering, and I wasn't done yet. My hand kept patting his back gently, rhythmically. It looked like comfort, but it wasn't. It was permission for him to speak, and he did. "I finally have a son," he said in a cracked voice. "I've waited so long for this. I just want him to be born safely." His eyes shimmered with unshed tears, his shoulders tense. "The doctors said we could try conservative treatment, inject progesterone, but the chances aren't good." I nodded slightly, still silent. "Progesterone could help. It relaxes the smooth muscles of the ureter and can relieve some of the pressure, ease the pain, but it doesn't treat the stone itself. It's a bandage over a bleeding wound." Jared buried his face in his hands. "But the hospital won't do it, even if I sign all the waivers. No one's willing. What am I supposed to do?" I said nothing because I knew that a man desperate for a child would go to any length to protect it. But what I didn't understand was why Paige, herself in that much pain, still insisted on clinging to the pregnancy. Urethral stones are excruciating. The pain is sharp, stabbing enough to make you cry, scream, collapse. No woman in her right mind would endure that kind of agony unless the baby was more than just a baby. Determined to understand, I began digging. I used every contact, every favor I could call in, every tool I had access to. I started piecing together Paige's life over the past 3 years, her relationships, her history, anything that might explain her desperation. I needed to know what she was hiding. Then one day I saw her again. I was in the operating room. Director Langley and I had just finished a difficult cervical cancer procedure. We hadn't even changed out of our gowns when we were suddenly called to assist with an emergency surgery in neurology. The patient has had a 20 millimeters ureter stone for several days. The nurse explained she's been getting fluids at a local clinic all this time, missed the window for optimal treatment. Now the entire right kidney is basically gone, only the cortex remains. Director Langley's face darkened. "We'll have to remove the kidney as we rush to the operating room," another nurse added grimly. "She's 5 months pregnant, showing signs of imminent miscarriage. Her uterus is bleeding heavily and her vitals are unstable. We're losing her." When I stepped into the OR and looked down at the patient, lying unconscious under general anesthesia, connected to a web of 4 lines and monitoring equipment, my breath caught. It was Paige. She didn't look like herself. The once delicate, pretty face was now pale and lifeless. Her skin was drenched in sweat, her lips bloodless. The girl who used to smile so smugly had all but vanished. My emotions twisted in a complicated knot: relief, pity, cold, satisfaction, confusion. I didn't know what to feel anymore. "She's bleeding too much," Director Langley said urgently. we'll need the family to sign off. If we don't remove the uterus, she'll go into hypovolemic shock and die. Her heart could stop at any minute. There was no time to debate for the next 5. Every department, urology, obstetrician and gynecologist anesthetic worked in tense, synchronized chaos. I stood at the center of it, part of the machine that tried to save her, tried to pull her back from the cliff's edge, and somehow we did. Somehow she survived. But something in me shifted that day. Because for all the pain she had caused me, I'd seen with my own eyes that she was willing to risk death for this child, and that kind of madness had a story behind it. And I intended to find out what it was from beginning to end. I had only ever played the role of an assistant, nothing more, nothing less. Every move I made was by the book, every procedure I followed was as standardized as it could be. I didn't dare step, even slightly outside the lines. But looking back now, I realize that even perfection can be overlooked, especially when the game has already been rigged from the start. When I found out that Paige was having a severe flare-up of her kidney stones, I deliberately booked flight tickets for my in-laws. Sonia was a calculated move meant to solidify my image as the ideal thoughtful daughters-in-law. I played the part so well, even I nearly believed it. On the way back from the airport, my mother-in-law was practically glowing. She kept rambling on about the crystal-clear waters of Wujio Island, her voice filled with excitement and nostalgia. The jello, like sea water, was so beautiful, so pure, so dreamlike, she said with a smile, eyes sparkling like a child's. I always regretted not having time to go to Sonia all those years, always on duty, always too busy. But now, thanks to you, I finally did it. Her words dripped with approval and her joy radiated through the car. She reached over and patted my hand on the steering wheel, her tone warm and sincere. Everyone envies me, she continued back. Then I made the right choice. Picking you as a daughter-in-law, you're 100 times better than Dongsi. Look at him, not even a single phone call these days. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, hands steady, face composed, but inside I laughed bitterly. A phone call with the kind of chaos Paige was creating. Jared was probably too busy just trying to survive her daily emotional torture. Even when he took care of her day and night, she would still scream, curse, and throw things like a madwoman. He looked more like a hostage than a boyfriend, but I said nothing. I just nodded faintly, pretending to be lost in thought. Only then did my mother-in-law notice my silence. "What's wrong, Quinn?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "You've been awfully quiet." I took a deep breath. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Mom," my voice trembled slightly as I spoke, "I might not be able to stay your daughter-in the law." Her smile faded instantly. "What are you talking about?" My eyes began to redden as I forced the next words out. "Jared, he's seeing someone else." "What? He got another woman pregnant," I whispered, "and she's even working in our department." The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over, running down my cheeks as I tried to keep my voice from breaking. I didn't even have to fake the pain anymore. It came naturally now. My mother in his face darkened with rage. "Take me to the hospital now, Mom, please. If we go there now, I'm afraid Jared and I really won't make it through this," I pleaded, wiping my tears. But the more vulnerable and broken I appeared, the more sympathy she had for me in this family. She declared fiercely, "We only recognize you as our daughter-in-law, no one else." Her voice was trembling with fury. "Go right now, drive." Reluctantly, I turned the wheel and headed to the hospital. As I drove, I tried to calm her down. "Mom, please don't get too worked up. You're not young anymore, your blood pressure." But before I could finish, she grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the elevator. The moment we stepped into the hospital, when we arrived at the ward, the door was already ajar. Inside, Paige was putting on another one of her melodramatic performances. Her voice echoed down the hallway. Calm down. If I hadn't signed back, then you wouldn't have even made it through the night. The child is gone and it hurts me more than anyone. I did it for your sake. Do you understand? It was an emergency. I didn't have a choice." As always, Paige, hysterical, sobbing, screaming and blaming everyone but herself. Jared stood by helplessly, rubbing her back, murmuring apologies, trying to soothe her like some pathetic servant, then smack, a sharp, resounding slap, smack, and another one. my mother-in-law, stormed into the room and slapped each of them. One after the other, they both froze, stunned, and red-faced Mom. Jared's voice shot up in disbelief, ready to snap back, but the moment he saw who it was, he swallowed his anger. "Mom, what are you doing?" "What I'm doing," she shouted, eyes blazing. "What you're doing is what's unforgivable. Am I still not your own son?" Jared asked, eyes red and panicked. "You are my son," she said coldly. "But if you don't apologize to Quinn today and deal with this situation properly, don't blame me for not recognizing you anymore." I stood behind her, silent, letting my tears fall freely, letting her believe I had just found out about everything. My act of wounded innocence only deepened her rage. She turned to Paige and pointed at her nose, trembling with fury. "In this day and age, if you really wanted something, anything at all, why did you have to steal a person? If this were ancient times, someone like you would have been drowned in a pig cage. You shameless little thing. How did your parents raise someone like you? What kind of disgrace have you brought upon your family? Is someone else's husband really that irresistible?" Her voice grew louder and shriller, her face turning purple with rage, and just when I thought she had finished, she stepped forward again, hand raised, ready to strike Paige once more. "Mom, please let it go," I said, quickly, wrapping my arms around her to hold her back just tight enough to look convincing, but loose enough to let her break free. Sure enough, she wriggled from my grasp and lunged again. She slapped Paige several more times, pulling her by the hair. Paige, still weak and recovering from her operation, was no match. Her screams filled the ward. No one is going to ruin my son's marriage, my mother-in-law Rod, as long as I'm alive. Quinn is the only daughter-in-law I'll ever have." The room descended into chaos. I stood there, arms folded, watching it all unfold with cold detachment. My heart, however, felt surprisingly light. I had kept my hands clean, said all the right things, shed all the right tears, and now I was watching them rip each other apart. What a satisfying scene. Then Jared, desperate to take back control, shouted, "Mom, my son is already gone. Please stop making things worse," in a final act of frustrated rage. He grabbed the heart monitor next to the bed and smashed it against the floor, but to me it was too late. The show had already begun, and I was the only one who knew how it would end. Bang! The sound of the report hitting the table echoed like thunder in the quiet room, and for a moment it felt as if the entire world had gone silent. Time froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Jared. "Honey," I said slowly, with a soft, almost trembling voice, "how could that possibly be your son?" He looked confused. I lowered my eyes and let out a bitter smile, masking my rage behind a look of helpless surprise. With shaking hands, I reached into the bottom drawer, the one that had held this secret for far too long, and pulled out the neatly folded medical report. I handed it to him, my fingers brushing his for a brief second before I let go. His eyes scanned the paper, quickly at first, then slower, and finally stopped. He froze, his gaze locked on three bold, unforgiving words: "Complete azoospermia detected." His face drained of color, the red flush of anger vanished, replaced by a deathly pallor. I could see the disbelief washing over him, like a wave crashing violently through the wall of denial he had built up over the years. Without a word, he suddenly sprang up and bolted from the room like a madman. I stood there motionless, watching the door swing shut behind him. 3 years, 3 long years of trying for a child, of tracking OVC cycles, of timing everything to perfection, and every time, month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. As an experienced obstetrician and gynecologist, I knew my body better than anyone. All my tests had come back normal: hormones, uterus, fallopian tubes, OVC, everything. Eventually I gently brought up the idea that maybe he should get tested too, but every time I mentioned it, he would shut me down with aggression, with wounded pride, accusing me of questioning his manhood. So in the end, I took matters into my own hands. Secretly, I collected a sample and sent it for analysis. The result: azoospermia XSPM, no possibility of conception. Even then, I had told myself, maybe we could still grow old together, no children. But with mutual respect, maybe that could be enough. But he had already chosen betrayal over honesty, and now he would pay the price. Half an hour later he came crashing back through the door like a storm. His footsteps were heavy, erratic. And in his hand he held another medical report, this one freshly printed from the hospital lab. His eyes were wild. Without a word, he barged into PA's ward like a beast unleashed. I stood just outside, hidden from view, but I could hear everything. "You lied to Emmy." His roar shook the hallway inside. Chaos erupted. I peeked in through the narrow window on the door. Jarrett had grabbed Paige by the wrist and yanked her off the hospital bed. She stumbled, then screamed as he dragged her across the floor like a rag doll, throwing her back and forth like a punching bag. "You damn liar," he shouted, veins bulging at his temples. "I treated you like a queen for the sake of that baby. I gave you good food, good clothes, money, everything, and now you're telling me it's not even mine." The entire ward could hear her wailing. Her shrieks pierced the air like needles. "You wanted me to raise someone else's son," he yelled, his voice cracking. "What do you take me for, a fool?" Paige fought back, clawing at his face, her nails raking his skin. But she was no match for him, not in that state, not against his fury. Within moments she was cornered, curled up on the floor, trying to protect her belly, her pride shredded. "You're not even a man," she spat through gritted teeth, trembling. "You think hitting a woman makes you strong? I gave everything to you, my body, my future. I nearly died carrying this child. And now all you care about is whether he is yours." She laughed then, a manic, sharp, almost unhinged laugh. "You deserve to be childless. A man like you will die alone." That struck a nerve. That was Jared's bottom line, his unspoken fear, his fragile ego, and she just ripped it apart. "You worthless woman," growled. "You really don't know when to shut up." Before she could react, Jared lunged at her. He lifted her effortlessly, like she weighed nothing, slammed her against the wall with terrifying force, and slapped his hand around her throat. Her eyes bulged, her lips turned blue, her feet kicked weakly against the floor. Please let me go," she gasped, voice barely a whisper. I was wrong. Only when she went completely limp did he finally release her. She crumpled to the floor like a rag doll, choking and sobbing, gasping for air like a fish out of water. Jared looked down at her with disgust. "The further you go from me," he hissed, the better. He spit on the ground next to her, then turned and walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. But Paige wasn't broken, not entirely. As she lay on the cold, hard floor, something shifted in her expression. Her lifeless eyes suddenly narrowed, and in them flickered a venomous hatred. "You wait for me," she whispered to herself. "I will never let you get away with this." Outside the room, I stood violently in the shadows. I had watched them destroy each other with no need to lift a finger, and honestly, it was delicious. For the first time in a long while, I felt light, free, vindicated. Jared's cruelty had finally been exposed, his mask ripped off, and Paige and innocence nothing but a calculated act. They were two of a kind. Deceitful, selfish, toxic. They had eaten each other alive over lies and betrayal. Dog eat dog, as the saying goes. And yet this wasn't the end, far from it. There was still one more person who had yet to make their entrance. Then suddenly, "Quinn, I was wrong." Jared's voice cracked as he emerged from the room, his face blooded, his shirt torn. He limped toward me and grabbed my arm, his eyes filled with desperation. "It's all my fault. I was blinded by her lies. Can we start over, please?" He looked like a stray dog, beaten and hungry, tail between his legs. I stared at the blood trickling down his cheek, the pitiful look in his eyes, and felt nothing but cold amusement. A slow, mocking smile spread across my face. "You think I'll take you back? You haven't even seen the worst yet. Once unfaithful, forever untrustworthy. That's what I've come to believe." But even with that truth burning in my chest, I wasn't ready to leave, not yet. Because at the end of the hospital hallway, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, I saw him, a tall, sharply dressed man in a designer coat, hair styled meticulously, shoes polished to a mirror shine, a rich second generation, no doubt. He rushed down the corridor with hurried steps, I scanning the room numbers like a bloodhound on a scent trail, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. And then I heard it, his voice slicing through the hallway like a blade. "You get out here." The door to the ward slammed open, and just like that, the fragile calm that had settled after the earlier chaos shattered into another brutal storm. Inside, his roar echoed off the walls. "What did you promise me? You took my money, told me you'd abort the baby, and now I find out you were planning to have it by my back." His accusations were venomous, spitting out faster than anyone could stop them. "You ever look at yourself in the mirror? A street vendor at best. Divorced. Desperate. Do you really think you're worthy of bearing my child?" He wasn't holding back, not one bit. "Or was it your plan from the start? You thought you'd trap me, pop out the kid, and then come crying for a fortune and child support. You think I didn't know how cheap you were." Then came the crashing, the thudding, the unmistakable sound of objects being thrown, kicked, broken, followed by loud, chaotic slaps that made even the nurses walking by freeze in their tracks. 20 minutes later, he strutted out of the ward. Even with a swollen cheek and a faint bruise under one eye, the arrogant smirk on his face told the whole story. He still believed he was the most charming man on this floor, and maybe in his mind, he was, whatever she broke in that room. He shouted without looking back, "Put it on Paige's tab. She conned me out of so much cash. Letting her pay a bit back is already me being generous." As he turned the corner, his eyes suddenly landed on someone. He paused, frowned, then walked over to Jared, who stood frozen by the water dispenser like he had just witnessed a ghost. The rich guy clapped him on the shoulder. "Brother, I don't envy you. Tough job taking over someone like her with women like that. Whenever you see him hit and run, that's the rule." He chuckled, then added with a mock sincerity that made my skin crawl, "Thanks, though. I heard you were the one who signed the surgical consent form earlier. Really helped me out. Man, I was starting to worry." The gratitude in his tone was oddly genuine, but his face was drained of color like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. His lips moved, but no words came out. He looked like he was standing on pins, shifting uncomfortably. His confidence stripped bare as the rich second-generation air finally disappeared around the corner. I felt something bloom inside me, something cold and sharp, yet deeply satisfying. A smile curled at the edges of my lips. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't even bother to hide it. 6 months ago, I had quietly pulled every string I could. I tapped into every favor, every contact, every scrap of gossip from old friends and classmates until I pieced the truth together. Paige had targeted that rich heir deliberately, using her soft looks and pitiful act to reel him in. She flirted, seduced, played the long game, and finally tricked him into handing over money and the cherry on top. The child she's carrying, it's not Jared's, it's his. All this time Jared's been nothing more than the stand in the disposable substitute, the guy who picks up the pieces and pays the bills when the real lead abandons the stage. But of course, for someone like Paige, a gold digger with no shame and no bottom line, why would she ever say no to a man like Jared, a fool who gave her love, care, and money without even asking for a receipt? Now it was my turn to enter. I stepped into the disaster zone of the ward, crumpled tissue boxes on the floor, a shattered glass by the bed, overturned chairs, and a broken flower vase dripping water onto the linoleum in the middle of it all. Paige sat slumped against the wall like a broken doll. My heart felt strangely light. But I still put on a sympathetic mask, sighing with a theatrical shake of my head. "Tiska is K, you really are pitiful." Her hair was a tangled mess, like a chicken coop after a storm. Her lips and cheeks were swollen, dark and bruised, looking like raw flesh under the hospital lighting. All traces of her once sweet and seductive appearance were gone. The men, my mother-in-law, Jared the rich heir, had taken turns scolding her, humiliating her, beating her down with words and more. Her eyes were hollow. She stared at the floor like she couldn't remember where she was, her mind teetering on the edge of a full breakdown. And yet, even in that state, when I stepped closer, she slowly looked up. At first her gaze was unfocused, but then clarity returned and she blinked hard, as if waking from a nightmare. When she finally saw that it was me, her pupils contracted. "You," she whispered, voice trembling. Then her tone sharpened into something between accusation and desperation. "It was you, wasn't it? You planned all of this from the very beginning, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me she already knew the truth. And I was perfectly fine letting her sit in it, letting her know she had walked straight into my trap, step by step, lie by lie. Right after regaining some strength, she completely lost control like a madwoman. Paige suddenly jerked upright, her body trembling violently as she supported herself with her elbows, her eyes bloodshot and wild. For a moment I thought she might lunge at me. "It's you, I'm going to sue you," she shrieked, voice cracking with fury and desperation. She scrambled toward me in a chaotic flurry of limbs, but her body had already reached its limit. Her strength gave out before she could reach me. I didn't even flinch, just shifted slightly to the side. Her momentum carried her forward, and she collapsed helplessly to the cold hospital floor with a heavy thud. I didn't move to help her up. Instead, I calmly walked over, squatted beside her, and leaned in slightly. My face wore a soft, almost gentle smile, but my tone was cold as ice. "And what exactly are you accusing me of?" I asked. "You conspired to hurt me," she spat, her voice shaking. "You planned this. You removed my uterus on purpose." Her voice was full of venom, but her body betrayed her, trembling, weak, completely drained. She tried to push herself up with trembling hands, but even sitting upright was a struggle. I slowly reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. With a swipe of my thumb, I opened a video file, footage from the operating room. On the day of her surgery, I had personally gone to the information department, combed through the hospital's internal network, and copied several versions of this video from different camera angles. I knew someone like her could turn on me at any time, and I wasn't about to let her drag me down with false accusations. I held the screen in front of her. The operating room footage playing clearly, over 10 medical staff in green scrubs bustling around the surgical table, focused, serious, racing against time. "This is the head of urology," I said calmly, pointing to a tall man in the frame. "That's the lead anesthetic. And that's our obstetrician and gynecologist, Director Langley." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Are you planning to report all of them too?" She didn't answer. "Should I send you a copy of this video?" I added. "Maybe then you'll see just how much effort we put in to save your life. 5 straight hours of intense surgery, risking everything to pull you back from the brink of death." Paige froze her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Her defiance melted into confusion, then faded into something else, shame, maybe guilt. After a long silence, she whispered, "So you already knew who I was?" "Not at first," I replied smoothly. "I only found out by accident 2 months ago when you were admitted to the hospital." I looked at her and added with mock softness that around the time Jared told me he was cutting off all contact with you, and I believed him. Why not smear a bit of dirt on Jared now he was already gone? What did I have to lose? What? Paige's voice wavered. "But he told me you were divorced. He even showed me your divorce certificate." She blinked rapidly, eyes flickering in disbelief. It was as if reality was slowly cracking around her. "Well," she murmured half to herself, "in this day and age, how can you trust a man's word?" A bitter smile twisted her lips. "Even a divorce certificate can be photoshopped." Then her expression shifted. Anger bloomed in her eyes, quickly overtaking the confusion. "But still, I never thought he'd lie to me about something like that." I watched her face as the realization sank in. Too little too late. "Let me guess," I said coolly. "Did he promise to transfer the apartment to you after the baby was born?" Her eyes widened. How do you know that?" "If I knew back then, when Paige was still pregnant and willing to risk her life through unbearable pain, I had my doubts. Was she doing this just for love? No, it had to be more. Unless Jared had dangled something big in front of her, she wouldn't have gone that far. A rich second generation like Jared knows how to manipulate people. He'd never win a woman over with just sweet hurts. Greed and obsession had blinded her, making her ignore the pain and push herself past the edge of reason. Eyesight, deliberately letting just the right amount of emotion bleed into my voice. "You know, in the end, you and we're both victims in this ridiculous farce. If it weren't for him," I continued, voice low and bitter, "you wouldn't be lying here like this. Jared," I said slowly and clearly, "is the real culprit." That name, spoken aloud, triggered something in her. PA's hands clenched into fists, her pale, swollen face twisted with fury for a moment, The rage in her bloodshot eyes seemed to burn away her weakness. There was something almost terrifying in her expression, a kind of malice that sent a chill down my spine, but I knew then I had planted the seed. I came to sow. My work here was done without another word. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. There's an old saying, heaven can forgive the sins we suffer, but not those we bring upon ourselves, and that's exactly what this was. Paige brought this on herself, so did Jared. Neither of them would find a good ending because neither of them deserved one. Ironically, in this twisted love triangle, I became the only one who stayed clean. I never laid a finger on anyone. I never lifted a knife. I simply observed. I watched them fall into the traps they built with their own selfishness. All I did was push gently when the timing was right, and they tore each other apart like wild dogs. What they didn't know was that from the very beginning I had my eye on the truth. The first time I arranged an ultrasound for Paige, she was complaining of abdominal pain. While ordering the pregnancy scan, I casually added ultrasounds of her kidneys and appendix. Just routine, I had said, harmless, foolproof, and there it was, a few small kidney stones scattered but visible. I mentioned it to Jared in passing, told him she should drink more water, eat a balanced diet, nothing alarming, but Paige was greedy. She loved hot pot, spicy soup, salty broth. She craved flavor more than caution, and she ignored every warning sign. Her recklessness brewed her own misfortune. A month after the surgery, Paige was finally discharged from the hospital, but instead of resting or reflecting, she exploded the day she returned to her workplace. She caused a scene. She released an intimate video of herself and Jared to the company's internal WeChat group. The caption read, "Male boss seduces female subordinate, shameless beyond belief." The chaos that followed, I didn't even need to watch because the story was writing itself. A storm of scandal broke out like wildfire. One explosive piece of gossip after another burst into the open, and in a tightly wound workplace like ours, the impact was immediate and intense. Whispers turned into heated discussions, judging stares lingered in the hallways, and the atmosphere became charged with tension. Some saucercam and, well, bemeaning people even took it a step further, posting the details online, stirring up public outrage and turning a private mess into a full OFB-blown spectacle. Eventually, the company, eager to contain the fallout and minimize the damage, made a swift decision. Both Jared and Paige were dismissed from their positions. And I seized the opportunity, armed with solid evidence of Paige misconduct, collected carefully and strategically. I filed for divorce in court. The judge, after reviewing the materials, confirmed that Jared had committed infidelity first. As the party at fault, he bore the consequences. All the jointly owned assets, including our prize school district house, were awarded to me. "Can't you at least leave me some dignity?" Jared had pleaded in a hushed voice outside the courtroom. As though shame had only just started to sting, but dignity, that was a luxury he had tossed away the moment he betrayed me through legal proceedings. I also reclaimed the $100,000 he had secretly transferred to Paige during our marriage, every penny I had sweated and bled for. I took it all back. Later I caught wind of Paige's downfall after being kicked out of the unit. She struggled to find work. Her resume, tainted with scandal, was rejected again and again. In the end, she could only pick up what part-of-time jobs just to scrape by, but Paige had long been used to lavish lifestyle. Designer bags, fives, star meals, and spa appointments weren't habits she could easily give up. Her meager earnings were nowhere near enough to feed her appetite. Soon her savings dried up. Out of options, she returned to her old way of survival, becoming a sugar baby again. But in a city like ours, small enough for reputations to stick, her name had long been dragged through the mud. She had become infamous, and the men who approached her now were not seeking love, only indulgence. They toyed with her, discarded her, and left her with nothing but false promises and emotional wreckage. The worst part, she didn't even gain anything in return. Instead, she was repeatedly deceived and used for sex. Her body weakened, her health took a hit, and soon even her mind began to unravel. Rumors floated around that her behavior had become erratic, unstable, almost manic. Eventually she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. As for me, I didn't hesitate for a second. The very day I finalized the divorce, I contacted an agent and listed the school district house for sale. Just the thought of continuing to live there, where memories of betrayal lingered in the corners of every room, made my skin crawl. The moment the house was sold, I received a call from the medical department director, Delaney. The secretary said over the phone, "A senior physician's promotion slot has suddenly opened. You're being given priority consideration." I could hardly believe it. Things were finally turning around 3 months later. On a bright, clear day, I walked out of the hospital building, the Langley warm against my skin. Just as I stepped into the open air, there he was, Jared, kneeling on one knee, holding a gaudy bouquet of brightly colored roses, looking up at me with desperate eyes. "Quinn," he said, his voice trembling, Can you give me another chance? Mom says you'll always be her daughter-in-law." It was almost laughable at our wedding. This proud, macho man hadn't even knelt to propose, but now, on the sidewalk before strangers, he groveled. But he never understood me, not then, and certainly not now. He brought roses, thorny, cliché, and painfully ironic. He never knew that I liked lilies, flowers that symbolize purity and a century of harmony, not these sharp-edged roses that left my hands bleeding. "If you had known this day would come," I said coldly, "why didn't you think of it back then?" And without another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't even look back. Because to me now Jared wasn't even a stranger. He was less than that. Just the sight of him made me feel sick. On the drive home, I thought about the medical reports I had quietly checked that morning, negative for both syphilis and HIV. My mood lifted further, as if a heavy burden had been cast off at last. Outside the car window, the summer Langley shimmered across the city. Birds chirped, flowers bloomed, cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees. A new season had arrived, and from this moment on, I promised myself one thing: I would love myself more. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video. Alright, that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We'll keep updating with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.